Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Film Haven Reviews. I'm your host Sawyer as always, and today we are starting a brand new theme. And it's kind of a sequel, kind of like our Godzilla, but I might call it something different. I was going to call it Underwater 2 because it's a follow-up to last year's Underwater theme, which was really fun. So last year we did, what's the movies we did? We did The Abyss with James Cameron. We did Leviathan with Peter Weller, and then we did Underwater, very on the nose there, with Kristen Stewart. And all those movies were basically underwater alien, or at least like in the case of Underwater, it was a lots of homages very much inspired by Alien, whereas The Arrival was kind of like Alien underwater if the aliens weren't bad. And then Leviathan is quite just like it's a copy of Alien, but underwater. Pretty fun copy, but a copy nonetheless. But for this theme, it's a little less just alien copies underwater. It's not as this movie that we're doing today, which is Below from 2002, that is more of an underwater, like quote unquote underwater theme, but we're doing more, I'm gonna call it the deep sea theme. We're doing deep sea movies. Because after that, we're doing the movie Virus from 1999, which is very fun. And a lot of people have thoughts on that, and I have some thoughts because I've already seen it. But then we have the movie Sphere from, I don't remember what year that is, but we'll be talking about that in 2 weeks anyway, so don't worry about it. But anyway, today we're talking about Below, and I just figured, it's the summer. We just passed 4th of July. People kind of want to cool off, so let's cool off with some water movies. This movie, pun intended, kind of flew under the radar or the sonar for just in general. I don't think many people know this movie exists. Let's see what IMDb says about it. It's got a 6.1 user score with 25K people voting there, which it's not too bad for IMDb. I guess more people had seen it over time. And then we have a 55 Metascore. So it's a very middling score, which is one of the reasons why I kind of didn't look at it yet. But one of the things that is the reason why I wanted to choose it is because it kind of covers some interesting ground. This would also, I would say, can be considered an ace-bad spooker, as we did that theme not too long ago with stuff like Stir of Echoes and Gothica. What was that? The Gift. It is definitely a ghost thriller more than anything, or maybe not more than anything. It is a ghost thriller at the very least. It could have fit in the Ace Bad Spookers. The only issue is the ghost isn't super, it's prevalent, but you don't really see the ghost very often. So it's not, it's a military movie. Well, let's actually talk about it real fast. According to IMDb, the movie's synopsis is: the crew of a U.S. Navy submarine in World War II rescues survivors from a sunken ship, only to face a series of mysterious deaths and supernatural occurrences. So basically, this is World War II. There's an American sub, and they are rescuing survivors from a shipwreck. And there's three. There's a female nurse and a British soldier. So there's two Brits, and then there is a someone who is being helped by the British nurse, a patient of hers. It was a hospital ship that they had picked up their survivors from. And this is not really much of a spoiler because this kind of twist happens pretty much in the first 10 minutes. But the third person, the one she's working on, is actually a Nazi. But because it was a hospital ship and he was a POW, but she was still his patient, or he was still her patient. So that's why that happened. But meanwhile, you've got Bruce Greenwood, who everybody loves. Bruce Greenwood, very, very good actor, who's the captain. And then he's got his number two, who is played by Scott Foley, named Coors. People have seen Scott Foley around. There's a lot of that in this movie. A lot of people that you've seen around. His second in command is Holt. Is played by Holt McCallany, and that is Loomis. Now, you guys know who Holt McCallany is if you've seen Mindhunter. He played Bill Trench, and he's been in a lot of David Fincher films, in big bit parts here and there. Very good actor. He is definitely underrated, and we need to see him more. This is a really early role for him. He looks very young, and he plays a really good character, Loomis, who's a bit of a hothead. He's a bit of a problem character. You got to have those in these kind of movies. And then you have like the goody two shoes guy, who's played by Matthew Davis Odell. Once again, another guy who it's like, where did he go? Looking at the IMDb here, that's right. Allie called this right. She was like, we've seen him before. He's in Legally Blonde. I think he was the boyfriend in that. But he's been in a lot of little things. I think he was bigger as a TV personality after a while. You know, that's a good way to go sometimes. If you had a moment in the late 90s and early 2000s and then you transitioned to TV, good on him for that. But that's a breakdown of the characters because it is important. The goody two shoes and the nurse kind of get together because not everything is as it seems with our captain, Bruce Greenwood, who is Captain Bryce, because as it turns out, he wasn't the captain he hasn't been the captain for that long. I won't give anything else away, but the former captain had died recently and things are not super kosher. Now the ghost itself, I mean, this is something you find out pretty early on. It might just be the captain. But why is he coming back? Why is he haunting the sub? And those are the questions that you have to figure out. So it's a supernatural horror, but it's also a thriller. It's also a mystery. So I think those kind of things, it's a horror mystery thriller, which if you've been listening to this podcast long enough, you know I love those. We did a whole horror mystery thriller theme almost 2 years ago. And so this is definitely up my alley, and Allie enjoyed this film as well, so I'm glad. I'm going to give it, oh man, okay, we're going to talk about this a little bit because 6.5 is my gut reaction, but I also kind of want to give it a 7. Here are the reasons why I'm stopping from giving it a 7. So I don't know if it's lower budget. Let's look at the budget here actually real fast if we can. The estimated budget was $40 million and the gross worldwide was $2.6 million. Yikes. So this was a box office flop for sure. $40 million budget, and if you watch the movie, it's given B-movie vibes. Now, don't get me wrong. You've got good talent here. Bruce Greenwood in particular, and the lady who plays the nurse, what is her name? Olivia Williams. She's in a lot of stuff. You've seen her around for sure. But the acting sometimes was not always the best. It was a little cheesy. And that comes from everybody except for Bruce Greenwood, who's pretty much good in everything he does. But even Loomis, even the guy from Mindhunter, you know, it's not so much. I don't know if it's necessarily the acting as much as it is the script writing. But funny enough, speaking of writers, this movie was co-written by Darren Aronofsky, who is very famous, of course. And he just did, he almost directed this film, but instead chose to direct Requiem for a Dream. So I think he chose right. We'll say that. But he did co-write this movie, which is interesting. Oh, and then one little tidbit, I got to tell you this. Zach Galifianakis plays a side character in this film in 2002, really, really early for him, and he's kind of a serious character. He's a little bit of he's like kind of a quirky character, but he's more scared than he is like silly. He's just like kind of a wimp. He's more intellectual. So honestly, a pretty serious character for him, and I think he did a good job, like as a serious actor. But yeah, I was like, whoa, is Zach Galifianakis in this real fast? That's crazy. And he ends up being a pretty major character by the end of the movie. Definitely always a side character, but he becomes more important over time as the numbers on the sub begin to dwindle. But yeah, speaking of things that kind of keep it away from being that 7 out of 10 is that the acting was sometimes pretty sus. The writing sometimes was a little sus. The CGI that they did have in there was not great. I don't think you need incredible CGI, and this is 2002, but once again, this is 2002. You have a $40 million budget, and you can't get CGI that look a little bit better. It's just a little sus on the CGI. So there's a couple little things like that make the film feel a little cheap, even though it's a $40 million budget. And so that kind of keeps it away from being that 7 out of 10. I mean, there's a lot of elements that are going for this. I think it was honestly, I was entertained the whole time. I wasn't bored. These are all good things. Like, and I think that the premise itself is really interesting. There's not a lot of military ghost thrillers. Like, these are, World War II mystery ghost thriller. That's just a cool kind of concoction of genres. But I think that's like, when I read some of the user scores, the user reviews, I'm seeing people kind of talk about that a little bit. It's like, this is a great World War II thriller, but it's not as good of a ghost thriller. The ghost aspect was very in the background. It was very subtle. It's kind of, I would say it's a little bit based on Macbeth. A lot of ghost stories are based on Macbeth, of course, because it's about a haunted, someone haunting their killer. But this one even makes homages to Macbeth. There's washing of the hands, of the blood on the hands. There is also literally Macbeth in one of the cabins, I think, of the captain. So like reading Macbeth. So it's like a blatant reference. So the haunting aspect of it is prevalent throughout. It's important to the movie for sure. It is the cause of the issues in the film. But the ghost itself is not super present as far as like scenes where it comes out. No, I don't necessarily need it to 100%, but when it does, it looks a little cheesy. It's not a super scary movie. Even the shocks are not super like, whoa, like the jump scares, I mean. So that's the kind of issue I have with that film, is that it's a little, with this film, it's a little forgettable, I would say. There are aspects of it that I do like, especially when it comes to the genre. And I think that they portrayed the mystery pretty well. There's some twists and turns that I'm not talking about that are pretty major. But I think overall it's kind of forgettable, which is why, all the Ace Bad Spookers, I think they hit around 7 to 6.5. I think it was anywhere from 6 to 7 is where we're hitting. And I think that's just kind of where this genre stays. I think they were all at 7, but there were different reasons for that. This genre, just like, it's just there it's like a good Agatha Christie story. It's not going to blow your mind, but it is going to entertain you the whole time. So I think that there are many elements to give it a 7 out of 10. And then we're just taking 0.5 off for some bad writing, some cheesy lines, and, maybe the lack of, not the potential of the story wasn't met. And that's a little disappointing. And so I will definitely give it a little bit less than that. But however, a 55 Metascore is not necessarily warranted, I don't think. I think it is good. I would still recommend this movie to people who are looking for a ghost thriller. Definitely on that level of, like, you've seen all the most popular ghost thrillers. Now what do we watch? And this is definitely one that I'd put on the list because it is interesting. I would love to see this movie. I was just thinking about this, and we'll talk about this in the next episode too when we talk about Virus, because I feel a similar way. But I just feel like sometimes movies need to, like, if there are going to be remakes of movies, like if they're remade, these are the kind of movies I'd like to see remade, because the originals had good kernels of potential, but then didn't like live up to that potential. I feel like if you given the right director, given updated graphics, updated technologies, we could possibly make this movie into something that is palatable and exciting for everyone, refreshing even. And that's kind of the same way I feel about the next movie that we're going to talk about, Virus, where it's like, ooh, this is such a cool concept. Wasn't executed super well, but it could be if you remade it. Whereas you remake these super popular movies that were already like originals, that were already classics, and it's like, other than like the Evil Dead remake, most of the time I'm like, like, why did we do this? Because it's like, if the original is good enough, we don't need to do it again. I mean, that's, preaching to the choir. I think most people are annoyed at remakes, even though we keep going to the theaters to watch them. But I think this is the type of movie that could be remade, and I would be happy to see it. So loved the concept, didn't love some of the things about it, and then ultimately it's pretty forgettable. So not too much to talk about here. The most interesting aspects of this movie are kind of the, like, who's in it, like, it's interesting to see this throwaway movie that really went under the radar. Apparently one of the reasons why it went under the radar was because, they were pushing for R rating, but the Dimension, who was distributing it, they were pushing for PG-13. And so they got kind of some, I don't know if it's bad blood or just basically what happened was because they held their ground and kept the R, Dimension went for a low release, a low profile theatrical release. And that is probably why it only made $2.6 million, which is really under $40 million. Being in like $35 million in the hole for this movie is not a good look. But it is really interesting to see Bruce Greenwood and Holt McCallany in this film, and early Zach Galifianakis. It's just kind of fun. And I think submarine movies are inherently interesting. This is kind of the end of the submarine era. What was the Matthew McConaughey submarine movie, U-57 or something, U-571? But even that was 2000, right? So that happened 2 years before this. So I think this was like literally probably the nail in the coffin to the submarine movie, because you had the 90s was huge with it. You got like Hunt for Red October. There was a couple. Hunt for Red October. Then there was the one with Denzel Washington. Don't remember what that one was called. Very similar though movies. Crimson Tide. You had Crimson Tide, you had Hunt for Red October, and then it kind of started off in the 80s because of Das Boot, which I did a review on that. One of the first movies I reviewed actually on my Instagram. But all these were all movies that are pretty dang good, especially those three: Hunt for Red October, Crimson Tide, and then of course Das Boot. But then U-571 didn't get too good of ratings, although I think some people do defend that film. And then we had this movie that didn't do too well. So it's just kind of like it kind of fell off. I would love to see the submarine genre reinvigorated, because I think there is just so much drama that you could have within that, just being in a pressure cooker inside the submarine. That's one of the things I liked about the movie, is kind of what I'm getting at. The setting was really cool. It's really scary thinking about being in what is like not just you're inside of a house, like a barracks, a building that people live, and there's a cafeteria and a kitchen, and there's also a giant room with a bunch of torpedoes and explosives in there with you. You are stuck underwater. There's just like anything. There's so many different things can go wrong. If you go too deep, you could be pressurized. And one of the fun issues in this movie was that there is a hydrogen issue. They get stuck on the bottom of the ocean, and then they can't really get up because this haunting is kind of stopping them from doing that. And the problem is that their hydrogen to oxygen levels is getting way off, and so there becomes way too much hydrogen. And so there's like kind of a timer put on everything and so there's a bit of a survival film aspect to this, which I think is inherent in all submarine films, which I enjoy that. So yeah, I feel like that part was really fun because people are getting weak and they're not being able to think straight, and then just having a bunch of hydrogen in your cabin is not a good thing. We'll say that. So there's some fun stuff that happens with that. I did enjoy that. So there's a lot of little things to enjoy about this movie, but ultimately it's throwaway. I won't drone on too much about it, but I do recommend it. You have to rent it right now, but I'm sure it'll be on Tubi at some point. This is totally like a Tubi film. They need to get on that. Anyone who's listening that works for Tubi, go ahead and put this movie on there, because I think you might get some traffic actually, because it's a fun film. 6.5 out of 10. I was thinking maybe I could convince myself to get to 7, but after talking, I think I'm comfortable with 6.5. And that doesn't mean it's a bad movie. It just means that it's a flawed movie, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay. Especially, I mean, you can see why maybe it didn't do so well. Although it could have done better. I think they were kind of snubbed by the distributor because they didn't like the R rating. Which it didn't really need an R rating. I think it actually could have made it through with a PG-13 rating, so maybe they were right on that one. But they didn't have to, lowball the distribution just because they got an R. That seems like they were making a bad situation worse, if that makes sense. But who knows? I'm not a leader of the industry, so I don't really know how those things work. Anyway, next week we're talking about Virus with Jamie Lee Curtis, which is going to be a fun movie. I'm excited to get into that. So I hope you guys have a great week this week, and I will see you next Friday.